I'm now going to tell you a little bit about the Catapult before I invite a fine panel here of Lane, Manu, Paula, and Andy, who really know their urban innovation onions, to share some of their thoughts. And then we're going to have a bit of a discussion around integration, pose some questions, and then we're then going to go to the tables where you can then either have a big Barney about them or a kind of violent agreement about whatever you think. And there's none of that reporting back nonsense, just discuss, and we'll try and capture it as best we can. Okay. I'm hoping this is me. Ah, very good. Okay. So what is the Future Cities Catapult and what are we up to? It is a technology and innovation center. It is a center of excellence on urban innovation. You can describe it in a number of ways. But what are we seeking to do? We're seeking to help UK businesses meet the changing needs of the world's cities. So it's very international in its outlook, and it's very much about trying to accelerate businesses to meet the needs of our cities. So people in cities can have a better quality of life, a reduced resource consumption and environmental impact, and flourishing jobs and careers. Catapults, they're a slightly odd name, aren't they? Anyway, they were once called just a Technology Innovation Centre, and then some natty branding person got involved, and then they're now called a Catapult. What are they? Well, they're all quite different in their areas of focus, but they all represent a large and growing global market opportunity where the UK has some strengths. So just to kind of skip through what they have in common. So the first question to ask is the view worth the climb? So how big is the global market opportunity? Is it big enough to warrant a centre? The second is, has the UK got what it takes to play in the Premier League? So there's Jose there. So amongst our science and research base, so our universities, amongst our SMEs, larger firms, amongst different types of organisations, how do we compare to other countries? Third question, it's about timeliness and timing. So oftentimes technologies can be a brilliant technology, but they need to come together at a time when culturally they're acceptable, or other technologies also come together, or the governance systems come together. So these things are critical to then how they get translated from essentially a concept into a commercializable proposition. And we believe Future Cities is about to take off. And then the last one, that's Angela. I don't know if you recognize her. The last one is about, well, if it's such a good market opportunity, why do you need any public cash? And so often it's then about trying to find out what are the specific barriers that are stopping businesses from really kicking on with their products and services. So just to take some of those points, we know that something of the order of $10 trillion, £6.5 trillion will be invested in cities and their infrastructure over the next 10 to 15 years. And pretty much McKinsey, all of the main kind of high-value consultants, Arup included, agree, concur on that kind of figure. And if there's a variance about the time frame, it's often to do with how quickly can you get the financial innovation to take place. So it's a big enough market opportunity. What exactly are we focusing on within the Future Cities Catapult? So our big idea is around taking a more joined-up approach to how you see the systems of a city, the energy, the water, the waste, the mobility, the ICT, and so forth. So when we talk about integration, another word for it, we're talking about, yes, integration at the level of technology, but we're also very much talking about it at the level of governance. So how can you create new public and private governance mechanisms, bring things together to make things happen? Integration at the level of finance. So how can you create mechanisms that use public funds but come together with private fundings? In particular, how can we create the kind of mechanisms that can pull down capital from the private capital markets, of which there is plenty of cash, but it's currently not being invested in what our cities and what our citizens need. So in a slightly more controversial way, you might say some socially useful financial innovation. And then lastly, and most critically, I guess, it's How do you make cities and the people who run cities and the people who provide services in cities much more attuned to what the people of that city want? How do you integrate and join up how, again, using different forms of mechanism and technology, how the leaders can listen to what the people of that city really want, but also take a view for the longer term and make decisions which perhaps may not seem palatable or the most important thing to do in the short term. But then how do you then win the hearts and minds to persuade people why this stuff really matters? So that's what we mean by integration. The UK has a whole bunch of strengths. We have some of the world's best universities in what you'd call broadly the future city space. We have a whole bunch of engineering, master planning, design, the city, the legal infrastructure, many really big deals, global deals that take place in cities. They're kind of engineered, and the financing is done here in London. So we already have many of the real assets and strengths, but we don't really necessarily shout about it. So what are we doing about it? Well, we spoke to something like 450 to 500 city leaders and the people that are seeking to serve the needs of those cities. And a whole bunch of barriers came up to why the market might not be taking off as quickly as we might hope it would. So that's to do with things like lack of financing, lack of evidence of performance and use of different technologies, in particular at a city scale, lack of the right governance mechanisms, simple things like not having the right procurement mechanisms, the difficulties that leaders face in trying to think truly long-term, so beyond the tenure of their particular administration. And all of these things, we at the Future Cities Catapult believe that we can help business, cities, academia to do bigger, better, and faster. We're building 3 core capabilities. So the first of those is futures. So how can we look at the long-run trends, see where the various scenarios are heading to, and then help cities and businesses think about the sort of things that they can do in the shorter term to create a more future-proofed city. Secondly, we're creating what's called a cities lab. Almost 2 words that are so overused it is entirely meaningless. But what we mean by this is a core technical, a core data science facility right at the heart of the Catapult Centre. And yes, when we say about data science, that therefore involves pulling multiple, divergent, small, large, messy forms of data together, understanding sensing. It's then about how we then do the analytics on that, how we visualize it, how we then do modeling to help us understand scenarios in cities. And it's then with a view to, not because we love data in itself, but actually to enable us to try and help businesses and cities make better decisions and better judgments in terms of what they choose to invest in. So it's about return on investment and business cases. And that's what this kind of information and this data can help us do. And currently, there's a big, big lack of it. Not just in the UK, but all of the people that are held up as being really the leaders in future cities. When you dig into what they're actually doing, there's very little evidence of what is already taking place. A point to clarify there. So whilst we talk about it as a data science facility, it's absolutely vital that we have all of the ologists in equal measure. So that's the anthropologists, the behavioral economists, and so forth. So we're working really closely with the ESRC and other research councils to make sure that we don't just use the data, that we actually try and understand and interpret it in a very human and citizen-centric way. And then lastly, what we call barrier busting. So this is, for example, working on a very specific applied project in a city and then trying to work out how we can pull through the right finance mechanisms, the right governance mechanisms in a way to make projects happen at scale in that city, but also to create those mechanisms in a way that they're open sourced and they can be applied and replicated in cities elsewhere. So a kind of catalytic effect of the work that we're going to do. Just a few examples of the sorts of projects that are underway. So Claire, do you want to give us a wave? There's Claire over there. So Claire runs this particular project for us. So Guide Dogs for the Blind, a rather brilliant charity, they recognize that dogs, beautiful, amazing things that they are, can only do certain things. And actually, it's very expensive to train a dog for a blind or partially sighted person. So what they wanted to try and understand is how can we use pervasive new technologies and bring them together in ways that can help blind and partially sighted people get around a city in a way that's much easier. And so we're working with a whole bunch of smaller firms and larger firms, like including Microsoft, but as well as a whole host of different firms from, I don't know if I'm allowed to say them, large retailers, I'll do it in the generic, train operators, people who provide all sorts of services between Reading and London. And we're then using that as a user journey to then try and understand what kind of technologies, what kind of data, what kind of user experiences do we need to bring together to truly innovate and make this stuff cutting edge. But the benefits from that won't just be for blind and partially sighted people, as critical as that is. It will also be that the kind of technologies that we're pulling through like 3D soundscapes, which Andy is helping us with, they are the sort of things that will be of value to all of us once they've been innovated. Second one, sensing London. So these two are a couple of London examples, as we're in London. So this is actually about taking 3 different areas of London at scale, so kind of 20-acre plus kind of areas of London, and testing a hypothesis, and it is currently a hypothesis, which is a big innovation opportunity around if you take low-cost and high-volume and low-energy sensing devices at scale, can they be as good as, if not better, than currently high-cost sensing devices, which is what we rely on? But they're often in such small numbers, you then look at it and think, well, actually, do I really trust the information that we're seeing? So we're working with Hyde Park and Royal Parks. We're working with the Elephant and Castle and Lend-Lease around a big project around there. And we're working with the Borough of Enfield. And we're looking at a range of different things to sense, ranging from air quality, a critical thing in cities, not just in the UK, but in certain Chinese cities now, there's been an explosion in quite a shocking way around the number of children as young as 7 developing lung cancer. So it's absolutely critical that we try and develop the kind of solutions that we think can fundamentally change both how we understand air quality, but also the kind of products and services that can be innovated so we can make better decisions about how we choose to get about, how we choose to lobby our political leaders and make them more accountable. But we're also doing things like, anecdotally, in a park, there's a sense that if you run a big, Hyde Park runs gigs, so it runs gigs like Blur concerts for a week. What they don't know is what's the impact on the biodiversity, almost the core purpose of having a park, of running those kind of gigs. They need to run them because they need the revenues in order to run the park itself. But at the moment, all of this is done without any evidence to try and understand how they could be doing it better, how could they do it in a way that would be less disruptive. And that's one of the things that we're working with them on. Data's going to come up a lot. We're almost trying to really dig into when people say open data and open data strategy for a future city, you get so far, but not really far enough. And so what we're working with in Manchester is 3 boroughs, and we're embedding, a little like Code for America, we're embedding code fellows within 3 boroughs to try and understand what are the difficulties of finding the right data, making that data available in a way that is useful so that you can get value and knowledge from that data set. And then with a view to then not just doing it at Manchester, but to trying to work out how we can then scale that into a much bigger program. This is a picture I took in Brazil. I was in the 5th largest favela in Rio. And what we're trying to make happen is there's the Brazilian National Development Bank is funding a project finance firm who have combined with a cooperative. And the cooperative is going to collect all of the refuse, all of the organic matter and the plastics from across this favela, 130,000 people. And we've put them in touch with British businesses that can take that organic matter, something like 60 tons a day, and turn it into, through a particular process, to carbon fiber, which will then be sold to VW. So essentially it's taking a problem, waste that doesn't normally get collected, creating jobs, 140, pulling through a British business. Each of these units costs of the order of £500,000 to £5 million, and then creating a really high-value product off the back of it. So when we're talking about systems and thinking about it in a kind of systemic way, there's a good example. And then in terms of financial innovation, this is one thing that we think we can really make some strides in, based on pulling through some of the real assets that we've got in terms of insurance and finance here in the UK and London. And we're running a series of things with, for example, Fiona Woolf, who has just been elected the... Is she the mayor? No, she's not the mayor. What do we call her? Fiona Woolf? Anyone know? Anyway, she's the other thing that isn't a mayor. Lord Mayor. I knew it was a mayor. Thank you very much. The sort of outcomes we're after. In very simple terms, we're after exportable urban innovations. So UK businesses meeting the needs of the world's cities. We're helping them to increase their global share, but we're also trying about creating a really strong cluster ecosystem centered in London, because that's where currently the real density is, but also recognizing that there are massive strengths in other parts of the UK, and we want to pull those through and help support each of them scaling bigger, better, and faster. So that's us, as the Future Cities Catapult. Now we're going to have a little bit of a handover to, he's a TV celebrity. I don't know if anybody saw The One Show with Andy. Hands up if anyone's seen Andy on The One Show last week. Hands up. Okay. Well, if you go to YouTube, you will see, and you Google, if you YouTube and
I'm not going to go on about the pigeon work. It's online. But my lab, I run a research lab. We got 24 RAs, 12 PhDs, master's courses. We're trying to bounce people out into the world now who know about geographic information, who can write their own code, can do the 3D viz, can do a good report, to do a good pitch, and they know how sort of urban places work. The lab does a mix of urban modeling, transport flow work, Internet of Things, emotions, how we feel in places. We build all these things, but we never get asked how these places make us feel. How does this room make us feel? Probably a bit cold. And we're moving it to the global view too. So we take the hyperlocal person to the urban view to the global view. So as a lab, we sort of view the urban realm as a server. And it's quite young still. It's a bit like hypertext was in 1994. So there's these little feeds beginning to pop up. There's information being put out there. But they're not quite joined up yet. We're a long way from it. I'd say about 20 years. This is a word which some people love, some people hate. I really like it. But we're not there yet. So you can't criticize the concept or the phrase because we're 5, 10, 20 years off. And it depends how it's defined. There's all these data feeds out there. This is our first piece of work, which is looking at live feeds. We're more interested in the live information out there now to try and see urban form as it is now. And if we know as it is now, we archive everything now. So every bike dock, every transport feed, we have happiness. We archive everything, and we can play London back over time, and everything's geolocated, which is possibly key to joining this world up. So this is how I view the term. It's not like a smart fridge. This is what I think it means. It's a phrase that actually came from monitoring hard drives in the 1990s. but it actually makes sense from an urban form. And we're trying to put science back into the urban system from a policymaker and an urban planning point of view. In the urban planning world and how we build the worlds around us, science seems to have got lost. It's time to put it back in. And there's new forms of information, not just the transport feeds, the normal geographical type work, emotions. I think we're interested in how people feel. We should be building happy places, places that make us feel like we've made the most of our day, and not ask people how they feel from a questionnaire. We should have real-time brain feeds. So as part of our PhD work, I have a guy who's walking people around town with a brainwave headset on, and we get a real-time feed of how their brain is perceiving place. This is walking down, this is Oxford Street here, Tottenham Court Road, north to south. It's a noisy place, it goes red. If you walk to the east, there's some coffee shops, you can have lunch, the brain calms itself down. From an Oxford Street point of view, with these brainwave headsets on, you can almost see which shops light up the brain. So we're interested in these new sort of real-time feeds to get a new view of the world. But that's the world from the ground. Next 5 years, there will be a new transport layer in place. It will be the layer of the roofs. Your mailbox will be moving to the roof. It's extremely low cost. There's companies playing about this now. It just needs a legal change, and not everyone likes the word drones. But they will be flying about the rooftops. They will be a new transport feed. And the world is therefore changing extremely quickly. And there's new ways to communicate it. There's new ways to view it. This is the Oculus Rift virtual reality headset. Arrived on my desk a few months ago. It launches to the public at large in about 6 months. It transports you to a completely new world. So London will be viewed anywhere in the world now. I can put this headset on, I can transport myself wherever I wish, and it actually works. This sort of tech has been around since about 1995, and it never quite worked. Now it does work. So there's new ways to communicate and view place. And everything we do, everything we say from a social network point of view, research labs can grab. Everything you tweet, you can grab your live feed. So architecture is beginning to talk. Wired called our work chattertexture. Not quite sure I like the phrase, but things are beginning to talk. These sensors, these feeds, are beginning to go out there in a hypertext server 1994 type way. But location is the key to summing all of this up. So I bounce around the research world from BIM, GIS, Internet of Things. There's city operating systems, a new phrase. I think that's wrong. But the software will begin to merge. And each of these location feeds can have rules. And rules are key to getting behavior from these feeds which are coming out. This is where I'm moving to the 20, 25 years ahead type view. So I think cities will become automated. They will run themselves. They will become a self-reporting urban form, and they will regulate themselves. From all these feeds, you just need to grab the live data, you put rules behind them, you feed them into various software systems. London will begin to run itself. And the software will understand the complexity of place. We don't. We don't know how urban spaces work. Software ultimately will. And I believe in 20 years' time, a little bit of software will ping up with the words London. And London will know it is London from a software point of view, and it will run itself. Lots of food for thought. It's all on our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy. I think we now have Paula from Disruptive Urbanism. Thank you very much, Paula.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Paula Hirst. I run an organization called Disruptive Urbanism, which is all around how we change, how we design and plan our cities. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges of integration that Scott mentioned, and how, in particular, if we align incentives better, we can help create better cities of the future. Now, I've got some really rather naff slides, I'm afraid, but hopefully you'll enjoy looking at rather silly pictures. So our cities, more and more people moving to them, they're pretty crowded places, really. They're also pretty dirty, polluted places for many of people living in them. And it's quite clear that we need to do things differently in the future to the way that we've done in the past. Many influences on our cities at the moment, changing how we live and work. Technology, which Andy mentioned, is providing a big impetus for change, for example, in the way that we deliver our public services or the way that we transport ourselves around a city, but also provides an opportunity for us to work in different ways to create those ideas within organizations that can change our cities for the better, so that we can stop designing this type of unsustainable city in the future. But how do we do that? One of the key things and ways in which I think we need to do that is by collaborating more. Now, that's easier said than done, but if we can do that, then hopefully we can create cities where people actually might want to live, as well as needing to go there for the economic opportunities, and create cities which use resources much more prudently and wisely, and then we can all be much more fulfilled in our daily working lives. Hopefully we won't all be jumping up quite like these silly people here. But to do that, we need to talk to one another. Now, these types of events provide an opportunity for us to start that conversation, and in doing so, then we can get together the ideas to solve some of those challenges that perhaps we won't be able to do on our own. But it's hard, right? Most of you in this room are probably here because you think that you might need to speak to some other people to understand what the solution might be to any given problem that you're trying to tackle. Most of you will find it hard. I certainly do. My entire working life, I seek to solve challenges in cities, but it often is despite of, rather than because of, making those systems making it easy. Why is that? I think that's often because there's a gap between what you're incentivized to do and actually what we need to solve our challenges in our cities. Why is that? Because organizations, companies, organizational structures tend to be quite silo-based. We're very traditional still in most of our organizations, top-down, siloed organizations. We also tend to think about things in a linear process. Cities, as we know, they're chaotic. No doubt some of you had issues and troubles getting here today. That's because things change all the time. Everything interacts with one another. But we still seem to think about an input and what that means in terms of an output. So, for example, if we talk about waste, why are we paying waste contractors per ton in order to be able to collect municipal waste? That doesn't make any sense if what we're trying to do is create energy from that waste, if we're trying to reduce the amount of waste that's generated, let alone collected in the first place. So we need to think much more integrated. So, but even finance. So Scott talked about some of the challenges and the need to look at financial innovation. So we've got technology funds that will invest in investments in technology. We've got real estate investment funds. We've got infrastructure funds. We don't have the types of funds as yet that will enable us to invest in an integrated asset, product, or service. Even in the public sector, we also have very traditional budget silos. Health, education, social services, you've got a budget for that. If you do something that creates an output in another area, that's not necessarily going to get any money to you. And our procurement processes also tend to not help either. They can be very technically driven rather than looking at what actually one's trying to achieve, prohibit small companies from being able to access supply chain, and really disincentivize innovation through those mechanisms. So how do we get from where we are all in our own little worlds, doing our own little things, to working in a much more integrated and collaborative way. Well, the first thing I would argue is that we need to think much more about outcomes. So we need to think really about what we're trying to achieve. And this is the key in cities. Are we trying to reduce improve air quality? Are we trying to reduce transport congestion? Are we trying to improve health outcomes? Are we trying to reduce poverty? What are we trying to do? And if you, as opposed to what technological innovation do we need to procure or buy or sell? So really what I'm saying is that what we should be doing is looking at, if we look at the outcomes, that can then help back in a process. So you then start from what we're trying to do, and then you can start to think, well, who might I need to collaborate with? Who might I need to engage? Who might I need to work with? What organizations need to come together in order to be able to help solve that particular problem and challenge? So by thinking outcomes first, we can start to break down those barriers between organizations and between departments and between companies large and small. We can think about what we need to bring together in that team. So do we need to think slightly outside the box? If we're looking to solve a problem about health, then obviously you may need some health people in that room. You might need some technology people as part of your team. You might also need some finance people, would you believe, in that conversation, bringing those together. And I think the other thing we need to do is to think about how our large companies can involve smaller companies in their supply chain to help with their own research and development, but also to help stimulate innovation. Now, partly procurement innovations can allow that, although I would argue that many processes already exist, we're just not using them. And also, and if we can get that productive relationship going by thinking about what you're trying to achieve, then we can get far greater outcomes. But outcomes isn't everything, even if we know what we're trying to achieve. If you're still motivated to behave in the way that you always have been, if your organization is still motivated according to previous targets of the past, if in your own personal objectives in your organization you are not motivated to or incentivized to work together, it will be quite hard. So we need to look at all of those things again. And ultimately, it makes sense, doesn't it? If we're working together, we can achieve more things than we can alone. So the other thing, I think, is that people often talk about money being the problem. But like capital markets, they're very intelligent. If there's money to be made somewhere, they follow the innovation, right? So, and many of the times the problem is, and financial organizations will say, that the product, service, project is just not well defined enough. So we need to be clear about what we want to finance in order before we start talking to those who can finance things. We also need to start thinking differently. Rather than thinking about grants or loans or equity finance or debt finance, start thinking about things in a very different way. So we can then come back, bring everything into alignment, and then help achieve some very different things in our cities so that everybody can be much happier in what they do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paula. So this is Manu Hernandez from Human City Scale.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to talk about smart cities, or smart cities in a different way than we are usually hearing about them. That's why I call my presentation that smart cities are already happening, but probably maybe not in the way we're being told. I'm a researcher, a freelance consultant. I come from Bilbao in Spain. And I work on very different topics, but all of them related to cities, and especially how to enhance public life in cities. And that's why, of course, smart technologies and digital technologies have a role on it. What I'm going to share is basically an overview of one of my last essays that was published in a book titled Smart Citizen. Smart Citizens that was published some months ago by Future Everything. So in case I missed something important from my presentations, you can find it there. Basically, I want to share with you three main ideas about how to understand smart cities. The first one is that technology alone is not enough. The second one is that there's no need to wait for the smart cities to happen, so we can describe smart cities in present tense and not only in future tense. And the third idea is that it's now the time to raise questions if we want to understand the implications of smart cities and smart technologies in our lives. Regarding the first one about technology, that is not the only answer for the kind of challenges we have to face in our cities. I understand that this cartoon is very illustrative about what's the role of technology in our cities. What we see is basically a very smart technology in its time, a traffic light that automated traffic flows decades ago, and it was the smart city on that age. But imagine how different urban mobility could have been in the last decades if not the technology, but the decision and the design and the priorities that were implicit in the way traffic light was deployed in our cities, how different urban mobility could have been in the last decades, and how different the way we enjoy and the way we live cities and the way we have been building cities could have been so different. So for me, it's an invitation to understand that technology, of course, it's the great tool we have, but apart from technology, we have to, well, as Saskia Sassen usually says, we have to urbanize technology to understand which are the implicit priorities, the implicit political decisions, and the implication in terms of regulation, public life, social behavior that are basically shaping the way we can benefit from these technologies. The second idea is, of course, that we don't have to always expect that smart cities are going to happen in the future. My point is that they are taking place now, and there's no need to wait for others. We don't need, as citizens, to wait for others to deploy certain technologies or certain solutions. Because the promises of smart technologies can happen today. And the third idea is that we have to raise many more questions that probably the mainstream discourse about the smart technologies is making. I think we have to be, or to add a critical mindset to the way we are approaching smart cities if we want to really understand their implication. That's why I get nervous about smart cities when they are, when we are using these kind of concepts that have to be really understood the way they can influence our cities in the future. And I really wonder if after all these talks, congresses, and discourse about the smart cities in the last years, if this is the ultimate representation of smart cities, is this really something that is shaping the ultimate idea about the smart cities, or if we can expect something more from it, especially if we understand that we are living in a cultural shift, that it's more about, not about designing technologies just for public officials and for decisions making, but we are living in a society that is more about peer-to-peer, it's about commons, it's about distributed production, it's about open source, and if we want smart cities to be something meaningful for citizens, we have to make smart technologies coherent with this kind of cultural shift we are living. And that's why great projects are taking place every day in different places with involving people and citizens engaging themselves using the technologies we already have to create and to build new solutions that are the real smart city taking place in these years. Because in the end, what we are facing, it's a change in the way we in the way we can approach technologies, because technologies, or certain technologies, and maybe some of you are involved in different projects related to these solutions. We have the technologies in our hands, in our pockets. We have available very cheap technologies that can help individuals, organizations, and startups to build the smart solutions now for real problems in our local communities. And this is why my final point is to understand that smart cities, it's not a dichotomy between great investment technologies in the future and cheap technologies in the present. For me, my point is that we have to acknowledge that this is already happening and to integrate in the whole idea of smart cities, because it will be the only way that the smart cities become something meaningful for citizens. And some basic ideas, probably for the following debate. First, I guess citizens won't buy into smart technologies and the idea of smart cities unless they find, or we find them really useful in our everyday life. I think the DNA of smart cities potential is unleashing, empowering people. This is a recommendation for the smart city industry to consider interaction design in their process and in their R&D processes. I think it's the time to think in terms of services and not products. I think digital social innovation is the smart cities in practice, and we really have to explore the consequences of these technologies and the implications of these technologies for people and for public life. And in the end, it's an invitation I want to invite you to have a cross-disciplinary approach to smart cities. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manu. And now we have Lane Doody from Arup, or Lane the Superbrain, as she's known.
Only to Scott.
Only to me.
Good morning. So my name is Lane Doody. I work for Arup, and I lead the Smart Cities Consulting group in Arup. And I was going to talk today briefly about some work that we did for the TSB, for the Future Cities demonstrators, and talk a bit about how integration happens, the two ways that they happen, through digital means and spatial means, and then talk a little bit about the challenges associated with that. So last year, as some of you will probably remember, I'm kind of standing in now I can see you. Last year, some of you may remember, there was, the TSB ran the Future Cities demonstrator competition, which was a competition open to all the cities over a certain size. I think it was 50,000 people in the UK. And the challenge was for those cities to come up with a demonstrator project that demonstrated systems integration in those cities. So where systems were defined by the cities as things like transport, health, education, energy, water, waste, these kinds of things. Glasgow was the winner of that, and they got £24 million, and they're now they're now very speedily rolling out their projects. But we did an analysis of all the 29 full feasibility studies that were submitted. And what we found was that there was lots of projects around mobility. So mobility was a big one. Energy was another one. Integrating mobility and energy. You can see how that would happen. Electric vehicles are a very straightforward way of doing that. Mobility and health was another one. So there's, I think, a statistic that something like 10% of the traffic in a city is associated with NHS-related mobility. So, reducing that, integrating that in some way, making that better, would have obvious impacts on congestion, but also air quality and so on. So that was another big one. And there were various others. But what we found was that all those projects, every single one of them, the 29, had a digital platform as their means of integration. So they were looking at data as a way of integrating those different systems. And we've heard quite a bit about data already today. The other way, I think, which is interesting of integrating systems is spatially. I mean, at its fundamental, integration happens at the level of the human being. You know, so we meet together, we integrate, we conceptualize these things ourselves and takes actions. But spatially is another way. So there was a very interesting example of that on the cover of the Financial Times a few weeks ago, which said that Amazon was looking at using TfL offices as a way of having these drop-off points, so people could collect their packages instead of the ticket offices. So they were going to remove the TfL is looking at removing the ticket offices by using different ticketing means, digital ticketing means, and that this space that this would free up could be used by Amazon as a way of integrating the logistics system with the transport system, which is very interesting. And so that's a very interesting way of integrating things in a spatial way. The issues that these throw up, though, are the same as probably as for the digital ones. So issues of logistics, so how would you, in front of every tube station, how would you make space for those drop-offs to occur? How would you create the additional space for, how would that change movement? What is the digital layer on top of that? How do people get notified about their packages? Wayfinding. So the commercial model, which is at the heart of this. So what is the commercial model for TfL, Amazon, and the citizens, the users, around these things? So I think that when we talk about integration, there are a number of different things that need to be looked at. The commercial model is key. Who is gaining at every stage? So we use a value chain approach where we look at who, in the different parts of the value chain, who is benefiting, and how is that benefit being paid for? Organizationally is another one. So how do we, in our cities and in our organizations, enable innovation? So particularly in cities, we're doing work with Bristol at the moment, where they're looking at how to institutionalize, in a way, if you can, innovation within their city. What are the organizational models that they need to put in place? Socially is another one. We've heard, I think Paula talked very eloquently about the need for social integration. How do, we don't all get on. We don't all, like each other very much sometimes. So, but how do we get over that in order to create the integration that needs to happen? And then finally, technical integration, which I think in a way is almost the least of our worries. Because we have, actually the technology industry have been doing technical integration and standards for a very long time. When I first started out, I worked for a company which was involved in middleware, and we were part of a group called the OMG, which is the Object Management Group, which had lots of competitors sitting on it, sitting down together, because they knew that if they did not, then the standards would not evolve, and they would not, it would not provide the right platform for their product. So I think those things can be overcome. So I think so. There are a lot of things that we need to get over and address in our cities, but I am hopeful that we can do this. I mean, we already globally run very complicated systems already. I mean, if you think about the global air traffic control system, and all the different points that needs, and the critical failures basically planes falling out of the sky if it doesn't work, that doesn't really happen. So, we have addressed these big problems. The internet is another one. So I think that we can address the issues. We're now becoming much more aware of what those issues are, and I think that organizations like the Future Cities Catapult and what the cities are doing and what government is starting to do is starting to address this, but it needs all of us. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you come up with in your brainstorming tables. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lane. What I propose you do is to test Lane's theory about people not getting on and wanting to argue a little bit. And we'll just start with the people on the panel. So if we could just pull up the 3 questions. I'm going to propose that, so we don't get too divergent, just if we can get some remarks from our 4 ninja panelists. Probably addressing the middle question first. So what does good urban integration look like? And what are the good examples? Because I don't see very many good examples out there at all. I think smart cities is a terrible way of framing the challenge and the opportunity. I know your business division is called that, Lane, as well. But so I think what Manny was saying about a kind of distributed economy and distributed production and empowerment, absolutely the heart of where the innovation is really going to come from and where the benefits are going to accrue. So anyway, there's just a few thoughts from myself, but I'm going to throw it open to our people who really know their urban onions and to remark on that middle question, if you will. And we're just going to take maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I think. Okay. So keep your remarks as pithy as possible, even if you're going to argue with each other.
Who wants to start? I want to start. I think. Can I agree with you, Scott?
No.
I think there are good examples of urban integration, but there aren't very many good examples of urban integration between systems, beyond things like electric vehicles, which are now starting to be deployed more widely. There are good examples of integration within systems. So if you look at things like smart parking, and the kind of journey planners that are starting to happen, like City Mapper, where you've got lots of different modes being integrated. I think that's a fantastic example of urban integration. But urban integration between different systems, I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah, I agree with that in the sense that it's getting easier, the integration within systems. What I would say, maybe just as a provocation, is do we really need to integrate or to keep the focus on integrate between systems? I mean, that's fine, but it's not a goal for governing cities. It's fine integrate different systems if it can benefit public decisions, but it's not the final goal just to integrate everything just for the fun of integrating everything. Of course, integration between within systems, I think it's a very clear goal of public decisions and designing urban systems. But I would really question if we have to really concentrate so much in integrating everything just to be sure that everything is under control and integrated.
And do you think the word's wrong? Because is it more about interoperability? Is it more about how, if the benefits are going to accrue to the people of a city and it enables them to do more things more quickly, to receive services in a way that better suits how they want to live, if it allows them to do things, just more efficiently or more effectively or, more happily, if you go back to what Andy was saying earlier, is that the point that we're getting at? I don't get a sense that we're just obsessed by an Uber system for the sake of it. It's with a view to what, as Paula was saying. Andy, you're the technological ninja, and you're getting a bit of a kicking, I think.
It's almost not a technical thing. It comes back to all of these points. There's some obsession at the moment that everything has to join up, everything has to feed in. And there's working groups, and there's meetings, and you'll fund 5 groups, and one of the key bits of that funding is that everything's got to talk and join up. It's not the world works. That's your point. We don't necessarily like each other, let alone other companies.
Me, I like everyone.
I do too, mostly. But firms, they're always competing firms. They need to get the economic lead. So we don't have to join things up. We've been trying to join transport system up with railways and a bus network for years, and that never worked.
I think this is quite fascinating because I'm genuinely interested as to what people think in this room when they saw a title about a subject, a presentation around integration, what they're thinking about. So, what does good urban integration look like? I mean, I used to work for the Olympic Delivery Authority. Most of you will know that there's a big Olympic park in East London. There's a big event last year, the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Some of you may have gone. What some of you may not have known was sort of some of the systems that sat behind that event and how the kind of water and energy systems sort of speak to one another, how they work together. But the integration bit around that was very much more around the architects, the planners, the construction contractors, small companies with innovative ideas working together. So it was an integration through the supply chain. So the output is not necessarily what people define to be integrated. I think it's often the process that you're trying to bring people together to achieve a common objective. Now, obviously, the challenge of integration now with the Olympic Park is how that park interfaces with its surrounding areas, and how do existing communities integrate with the new environment that's there and with the new communities that will move into the park, right? So this is also not a process which ever ends. It continues, and the integration is like, do you feel part of it? Is it something that you feel that you belong to?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If we could have a little round of applause for Lane, Manu, Paula, and Andy for their provocations. We're now going to revert to the discursive, argumentative, fun, whatever bit you want to do on your table. On each table there is a facilitator, or at least I hope there's going to be a facilitator, and they will be either from the Future Cities Catapult or from Rework. They know the rules, they know what you're going to be up to. I think basically pick one of those questions and have an interesting discussion. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much.